Welcome to another episode of Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. We got to give the drummer some. Drumming is one of the most profound expressions of culture, rhythm, and storytelling. In West Africa, the talking drum was used as a means of communication, mimicking the tonal patterns of human speech. In East Africa, drums played roles in rituals, festivals, and ceremonies. In Southern Africa, the marimba was an integral part of communal gatherings and storytelling. The drum also was a source of resistance during American enslavement. Many enslavers were fearful of the communicative power of drums. The 1739 Stono Rebellion is a good example in which the enslaved used a drum to send a signal for rebellion. From traditional ceremonies to contemporary music, drumming has evolved while retaining its deep cultural significance. Now here's an excerpt from the documentary trailer 400, an African epic, composed by Dr. Mark Lomax II.
And if we truly want to make America great, period, then we have to collectively understand where we have been, because that is why we are. And facing that together allows us to move forward together, because we are better together. Ashe? Ashe.
Joining me is more than a drummer. He is a scholar who pushes the boundaries of music. He is a critically acclaimed composer, a recording artist, drummer, activist, educator, and author. He is a sought-after lecturer who specializes in social, political, and spiritual aspects of African-American arts, music, and race, using the arts to build community. Help me welcome Dr. Mark Lomax II.
Yo, what it do?
Oh, I would just want to thank you so much for joining me here today and just having this conversation. It's a pleasure. You making the trip.
Man, the pleasure is all mine. It's good to see you, bro.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. So I want to get into the conversation that we have here, and also our viewers and listeners just got a little dose of some of your work as well. But I'm going to revisit your first encounter with the drums. I mean, what was that like? Can you unpack that for us? Your first encounter and I guess, when you fell in love with the drums or music, I should say.
So I can't tell you what my first encounter was because I don't remember it.
Wow.
They say that when I came out of the womb, I was tapping my ear. As a baby, I would suck my thumb and tap my ear, right? And my mother and father were over the gospel choir at Virginia Tech. My mother started it. My father was the chaplain. And they said when I was 5 or 6 months old, I was sitting in the front row of the little space where they were rehearsing, and they were trying to get the sopranos to sing a note, and I hit the pitch. And they kind of looked like, huh, right? Incidentally, the drummer for that gospel choir was Timmy Haupt, the drummer for Heatwave.
Okay.
Right, so that's what I was checking out as an infant, right? Mm-hmm. This amazing drummer, Timmy Haupt. And then my grandfather made my first drumsticks from a tree in the yard. My first drum set was chitlin buckets, the red bucket with the white top.
Yes.
And then at 2, I'm playing drums. There are pictures. There's evidence.
So you were a bucket boy.
I was a bucket boy.
Yeah.
Right, chitlin bucket boy. So that had some soul, right? And then I started playing with adult choirs in church when I was 6. I started as my mother's musical director when I was 12, and then started playing jazz at 14, touring gospel groups at 14. So I don't remember, how the drums came to be. I was just told I used to run to the drummer. You know, another drummer when we moved to Columbus was Harvey West. He was the church drummer at Gospel Tabernacle. And there are pictures of me sitting in Harvey's lap with the drums. So I'm playing the top and he's playing the bottom because I couldn't reach the pedals. Wow. You know. And then my mother took me to this music teacher to be assessed when I was 2. And
wait, hold on. You said when you were 2?
I was 2. So this is after they got tired of me running to the drums. They're trying to see what's going on with this kid, right? And so this 10-year-old is getting a lesson on the drums, and I'm squirming in my mom's lap. She's doing everything to just contain me. And as soon as the lesson is over, I just break free and I run to the drums, and I'm playing the lesson that the 10-year-old couldn't get. And the teacher was like, yo, we need to sign him up now. You know what my mama said? He's not going to practice. So she didn't sign me up. But it's something that I've always just in my head and heart, the drums have always been the thing. And because of the choices my mother made, right or wrong, you know, it pushed me to learn the other instruments that I know. And that's what led to me being a composer. So it's like everything starts and ends for me with the drums.
Well, let's talk about that. You know, I introduced you as a drummer, and you said the other instruments. So what are the other instruments that you do play?
So when I was a kid, I ended up playing 13 instruments. Because I was the youngest musician in the bands, I couldn't always play the drums because like in high school, the upperclassmen would be the drummers. And so I had to figure it out. So I learned how to play the flute, and I picked it up in August. I auditioned for concert band in late August, and I got second chair after playing it for like 3 weeks, right? So it's an acumen thing. In high school also, we had a vocational music program. And again, the upperclassmen were the drummers. They needed a piano player. So I learned piano. The first day of the program was a Wednesday, and the teacher came and dropped, you know, a whole book of Thelonious Monk tunes and said, you have a 2-hour gig on Friday. You need to make arrangements and have enough material for 2 hours. And I had only been playing piano for like a few months in preparation. But Monk is not easy music for anybody, let alone a brand new piano player. Right. And so I was thrown into the fire at every turn in every instrument. And then I know all the percussion, classical percussion. So timpani, snare drum, glockenspiel, marimba, xylophone, vibraphone, all the things, you know. Vibraslap.
I am so jealous right now because I played music has always been a part of my life, not on that level, but I would say that, you know, I played the saxophone. I could never get past second and third chair. It was these two young ladies, Gabby and Emma. Oh my goodness, I could not pass them up. I would go in and we would challenge for the chair, and I could not get past that third chair. Gabby and Emma had first and second chair down locked. And then for marching band, I made a pivot to drums. And I fell in love with the quads.
Oh yeah, that's what I played in marching band.
Yeah.
But I was this tall. I was like 3'10", marching like this because they were heavy, and I had to carry them. But yeah, that was the spot.
Oh,
it's the best spot in the marching band.
It is. You get to create your cadence and marching, and it's just a feeling you have when you look on, like you're in a parade and you look over to the side and you see people bobbing their head.
Yeah, there's no better feeling.
You know you got.
Well, see, girls is what made me stay with the piano for a while because, again, growing up being active as a church musician, you know, I had a god uncle that had a professional choir that my mother sang in, and they would rehearse a few times a week. So I would be in the rehearsal because my parents divorced when I was 6, so we had to go to rehearsal. And I would be running back and forth from where the choir was to where a piano was in the other room, trying to figure out what the chords were. And then I taught myself how to play by ear. And then Brian McKnight's song Anytime came out. And my mother loved Brian McKnight. So I was at my school playing Anytime. And the girls were like, oh, you know Brian McKnight?
Man,
I was like, of course I do. Yes, I do. Hey, baby. How you doing?
That can always be a motivator, you know that's for sure.
Music is how I met my wife. I'm telling you, everything for me starts and ends with the drums.
Well, it sounds like you couldn't be doing anything other than what you're doing. You know, when you're talking about tapping on your ear. Now, first became aware of you through the 400 and African epic. You know, I was working at the museum and was able to, and then I saw the list of musicians that were involved. You know, I was like, oh, all of them are gonna come and gonna be here to perform. And I was just like, I looked like I was the man because I was telling people that were jazz enthusiasts and whatnot. You know, and so can you talk a little bit about, you know, 400 and African epic, about that project?
It's, I think, a defining work at this point. It was really interesting because of who my father is. My dad is one of the world's leading theologians in African-centered Christian ministry, which means he spent a lot of time in Africa.
And your dad is Mark Lomax.
My father is Reverend Dr. Mark Lomax Sr. I have his name and face.
Yeah, we want to give him that love. So.
For sure, I say. So he spent a lot of time in Africa, really understanding traditional African religious thought and spiritual traditions. And as an academic, a theologian, he began to kind of overlay those African traditions with how we have practiced our spirituality in North America since 1619, when we were first brought to this continent as enslaved Africans. We had been here before, free. Mansa Musa sent folks in the 14th century, right? And we know of other expeditions west from the continent. But my father began to overlay this, and we had just always had these conversations. His church is First African Presbyterian Church. They have an ankh instead of a Christ, instead of a cross. So I grew up in a particular spiritual tradition and had just started a new job in philanthropy. We were kind of becoming our version of middle class, and people were talking about the new black. This was like 2016. You know, all these things that were happening, right? I had just become Dr. Lomax. I was trying to figure out what it meant to be a black man, husband, father, community member, educator, artist with degrees in classical composition, which is a white people thing. You know, all of that stuff. That's actually what my grandmother said when she saw my dissertation. She was like, isn't this what white people do? And I was like, there would be no classical music if North Africans had not gone to Europe in the 8th century and gave them a tradition of music, right?
There it is.
But we don't know this history. So 2016, I'm wrestling with all of this stuff, and I had just been not in my studio. I had been learning this new job. I had been, doing all of this other stuff, really healing from the doctoral program. And I finally made it down to my studio, and I just woosah, I took a breath. And there's no rest, because as soon as I took that breath in the space that I should have been in this whole time, right, working on the art and doing the work that I've been meant to do, it's 1619, 400 years. This buzzed in my whole being, like it was like a spidey sense, right? I'm up, and I'm like 1619, 400 years, 1619, 400 years, and I didn't know exactly what that meant, and so I was like, I got to do something. We only have 3 years to tell this story, and I reached out to every composer, artist that I knew. And I was like, 1619, 400 years, 1619. They're like, Lomax, you crazy. What you talking about? And I was like, it's 400th anniversary of our being brought here. How do we tell this story? What are we doing? And nobody was really thinking about it. It wasn't on anybody's radar. So I sketched a project, and I was thinking I was going to write my first symphony. Right, I had already done a bunch of orchestrations for symphony. I had, for my dissertation, written a chamber orchestra piece that was a ballet called The Butterfly Princess. So I was figuring out my voice as an orchestral composer. However, as I'm sketching, theme after theme after theme comes out, and I'm like, this is way too much music for a past, present, future 3-movement symphony. Right, and I'm looking at all of the themes that are intact. Like, this is a piece by itself theme, not a theme that connects to another theme that tells an orchestral style, compositional narrative. I'm like, these are albums. And as I'm looking, I said, 1, 2, 12.
It start pouring out.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, nobody does 12 albums. This is ridiculous. However, the pull from the ancestors was such that I could not stop composing. I could not stop researching and making notes. And the story was, it just over a month, boom, everything was pretty much composed. And I said yes to the ancestors.
There you go.
And I said, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to figure it out. Right. So this was spring of 2016. And I did the budget, and I was like, I can't afford to record all of these in the studio. I can't afford to do all the artwork. It was just too big. It was $460,000 to do it the way I wanted to. So I started buying equipment because I had this new job and I was making more money. And I used all the holiday sales, like Memorial Day, Independence Day, 4th of July, all the sales, right? And I was just buying microphones and I was buying equipment because my thought was I was going to record everything live, right? And use the money from the live event to pay the band for the rehearsal and the performance and then capture it. Now, I didn't know anything about recording, right? So I'm on YouTube and lynda.com at the time, learning all the things. And I did. I got about 6 of them done. And things started happening. When I said yes, I started to get commissions and I started to get residencies and things that allowed me to do this work in the way that I had thought was best. And I got half of it done. And the music was great, meaning the guys played well, the guys in my band, but the recording sucked because I didn't know what I was doing. And so, in the fall of 2017, I was just in my mind, like I could really use another $30,000 or $40,000. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call to be a resident artist at the Wexner Center, and they gave me that money. And then I finished everything. We recorded 7.5 records in 4 days. Wow. To finish the whole project. And we released it in 2019. In fact, I recorded the last piece, which is Africa United, the very last album, solo drum set, in my basement, December 28th, 2018. And we released it less than a month later, all of it at the same time, January 23rd, which was the 40th album that I released under my name by my 40th birthday, to commemorate the 400th year since Africans have been brought to North America as enslaved human beings.
I think that's the power of, music and our culture. When you talked about the ancestors were speaking to you, so, the Ryan Coogler movie Sinners came out.
I'm going to see it today. Don't no spoilers.
I won't do that. I would just say that there is this, where they're talking about the ancestors and the influence of how our forebears and our ancestors are still living through us, through our actions, through our music, through culture, and many different things.
And not only that, the power of story is something that we mastered several millennia ago. And that's why I called it an African epic, because the epic is a storytelling mechanism used by the Jali and Jalia, what the French call the griot, in West Africa. And sometimes those epic stories would take up to a week to tell the story of a great hero or shero of that particular society, or the leaders, like chief, king, princess, queen, whatever the case may be. And to your point of the ancestral guidance and the connectivity to our heritage, not just the story of enslavement, but the story of a people who not only survive but thrive, right? I wanted to connect all of those things. So we did the 12 albums. We did 3 films, a concert documentary, an education film, 2 concert documentaries, an education film, and a curriculum guide to tell these stories in various ways. So through the education channel, through a visual arts channel with the films, and through the music itself, because it was so important.
Right. And then I want to, and there's another project.
Have lots.
Right. And the one I want to go to is Reconstruction.
In oratorio.
Yes. And so I know it's an exceptional ensemble, over 40 artists.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about that project and the significance of that?
Yeah. So I wrote a piece back in 2009, I think. No. Yeah, 2009. It was actually my master's thesis. It was called A New America. And it's for a 30-voice choir, 7-piece improvisational ensemble, and a 30-piece string ensemble. So it's a big piece with 2 soloists, soprano and baritone voice. And it was rejected by the committee, my graduate committee, because they didn't know what kind of music it was. I wrote a Negro spiritual style piece to start it.
They didn't know what kind of music was because it didn't fit into a certain box.
It didn't fit into their box.
Oh, okay.
Right. And it's really the beginning of what I call Afro chamber music. It's music that takes source material from African American traditions, uses Western contemporary compositional techniques to create new work for chamber ensemble. So African source material, chamber music. Chamber brings in the European techniques and ensemble types to create something new. And so I wrote a Negro spiritual style kind of source material texture. I use compositional elements from Ellington to Bartok and Ravel, and there's avant-garde jazz improvisation. And they were like, what is this? And I was like, it's me.
That's right. A big pot of gumbo.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, because it's who we are as Africans in America. I think we have the privilege of an existence that has absorbed all of this energy, good, bad, tragic, and amazing, right? And that's what our blues is, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what does that blues sound like from an ensemble that's reflective of the culture itself? Right, the violin comes from Africa. It was called many names, but one in particular was an ngoni, which, in the style of the talking drum, also spoke the language of the people who played it. Right, so the violin's not foreign to us.
Yep. The banjo,
banjar is what we called it. Right, the drum itself. Right, and my drumming style is an effort to communicate through melody and sound in the way the talking drums did. So I was working to bring all of that into one, what I call organic hybrid to create something new, and they had no clue. So it was new. They didn't know what it was, and it was rejected. It hadn't been performed. So as we're going to the 250th birthday of this experiment we call America, that's my father said. Right. You know, I was trying to figure out how to engage this musically, and so I reworked that piece into a reconstruction oratorio. An oratorio is an unstaged opera. And so it took that original piece and I reworked it. And so now there's a hip hop element with the DJ and the rapper. And I updated some of the musical textures for kind of where my head is now.
Wow.
Yeah. And essentially it says, you know, in order for us to create a new America, a place that's actually just, democratic, and inclusive, then we have to embrace our authentic and radical humanity and see each other as ourselves. It's an Ubuntu kind of idea.
Embrace our authentic and radical humanity.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
So we're hoping to have that performed in the next couple of years.
Okay, well,
if anybody has money and wants to contribute, you know, it's going to cost me about $300K. So let's do it.
Hey, well, when it happens,
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I have to make sure I got to be front row.
That's right.
I have to check it out.
That's right.
So I want to pivot into another project, and as I said, I played the saxophone, and we are amid the 50th anniversary of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme album. It was released in 1965. He presented the album as a spiritual declaration that his musical devotion was now intertwined with his faith in God. In many ways, the album mirrors his spiritual quest that grew out of his personal troubles, including a long struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. And so let's talk about the project that you're composing in honor of the 50th anniversary. You know, what are some of the nuances about it?
Yeah, so 3 quick things about that. One, growing up in a traditional and conservative, like I'm talking Pentecostal, black church background, nothing that you were giving by way of gift and talent was to be used outside of the church, because now you're in the world and that's sinful. Right. However, I was introduced to jazz, or black improvisational art music, as I tend to call it, when I was 12, and began to really pick it up and practice and kind of aspire to that artistic expression by the time I was 14. And that put me at odds with many people in my family, in my church community. Wow. And I didn't know what to do with that, because my idea was, if the God of the gospel that we honor through our gifts gave this to me, then how could it not be of God? And nobody could answer that question. And in fact, they told me not to ask it. When I came across A Love Supreme, I didn't know what it was. I hadn't heard it before. It didn't sound like anything I'd heard before. And as was my habit at the time, I would be playing video games, and we had a 6 CD changer, and I would put 6 CDs, and I came back. I would spend insane amounts of money as a teenager on CDs, like at least $200 or $300 a week. And so I got, and that's when, CDs were like $15, $20.
Now, where would you go get your CDs from? Just quick question.
Oh, in Columbus, we had a place called Used Kids.
Okay.
It was kind of a cellar basement kind of place. It was grimy, grungy, but they had Sun Ra and Albert Eiler and Train.
My place where we had Camelots.
Oh, Camelot. We had Camelot too. But see, Camelot was only like mainstream in Columbus. It didn't have like the dusty Negro music that I was into. Okay. The blues and all that kind of stuff.
So we had a spot like that. It was called Orbits Records.
I've heard of Orbits. Yeah.
Yes. And that's where you could get like a whole,
So I went and spent $300 at Used Kids and brought back like 15 CDs. Right. And Love Supreme was one of them. And I'm playing NBA Live, and I'm going for the championship. You know what I mean? It's like 94. Right? I'm in it. And the record comes on and goes. It comes on and goes. The third time I hear it, I stopped playing the video game and really started listening, because it took me 3 times subconsciously to really understand what was being communicated. I did not understand the music. Can't say that. Right. But something grabbed me. It was familiar. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first thing. The second thing, when I was 16, I met Elvin Jones. And I had 3 drum lessons with Elvin between the time I was 16 to the time I was 22, right before he passed. And we didn't sit at the drums, but he let me sit next to him the first time for 3 hours while he greeted people, signed stuff, and just kind of talked to folks. And then at the end, when he was ready to go, he looked at me, he said, son, you get what you needed? I said, yes, sir. The last time I saw him was in New Orleans. I was playing with Delphio Marcellus at a spot called the Funky Butt. It's right across from Congo Square. It's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. And this apparition, while we were playing, started moving. Elvin Jones was, pretty dark-skinned. Mm-hmm. But he wore these he had a bright leather trench coat. And I was like, who is this cat looking smooth? Like, what I mean? He comes up, he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he takes the drumsticks and he plays my drums. And I'm like, and then he gets up. He's like, I think you got it.
Wow. And
within a year, he had gone, made his transition. So the first thing is Love Supreme was familiar after a while. I kind of understood it at a deep spiritual level. And then I had this personal interaction with Elvin, right? And it really helped me understand the spiritual aesthetic of Black music. And it gave me an artistic kind of foundation to kind of be okay with not being in the church and moving artistically away from the way I was socialized. And so when it came down to the 50th anniversary, I was like, we have to do this piece. We had never played it because in the canon, it's a special piece for us. Right. Eddie Barrett's my saxophone player, and we've been working together since I was 16. Will Minifield from Cincinnati, Dr. William Minifield is the piano player. We've been playing together since 2001, and Dean Hewlett, our bassist, he and I have been playing together since 99, 2000. So we've got some time under our belts, and we collectively didn't feel earlier that it was appropriate for us to play this piece. Right. 50th anniversary is a special thing. We actually played it first at Eden Park, and it didn't go bad. In fact, the response we got from it was unexpectedly great. And we were like, okay, so after having done the 400 and played it once in an impromptu way, we knew we had the maturity and spiritual artistic wherewithal to approach the piece respectfully while also making it our own. Right. And so we did a concert of it, a program that on the first half had our own original compositions inspired by Train. And then the second half was A Love Supreme. And we recorded it, and we were able, I think, to engage one of the most critical pieces of our art music since 1619 in a way that is respectful of Coltrane and the quartet, but also presented through our own lens. Right. And I'm very proud of that.
In preparation for our discussion, our conversation, I revisited. Mm-hmm. I think I listened to John Coltrane's "A Love Supreme" had it been a few decades ago. Mm-hmm. And to revisit it, my ear is different now.
Yeah.
As a 50-plus-year-old man than it was, when we're talking about when I was in my 20s or 30s. And so there were different nuances. And I paid closer attention to the drummer. Who was the drummer?
Elvin Jones.
Elvin Jones
is the drummer. Jimmy Garrison is the bass player. McCoy Tyner is the piano player.
And so it's amazing to hear. So when I was listening to it, I was thinking about you because I'm like, okay, I can see why.
Yeah,
you can't let this pass up.
No, man.
You have to do something with it.
And this is where I might get in trouble, but it's the truth. Our music has been co-opted. It's been corporatized. It's been commercialized. And what people don't often know about A Love Supreme is that Impulse didn't push that record. Coltrane was definitely their star, but they didn't push A Love Supreme. The reason A Love Supreme became what it was in the marketplace is because Impulse, as an indie label, was at they're at a conference, right? An industry conference. And the guys who were the salesmen had this record. It was striking because it was black and white. And at that time, that was unusual. They hadn't heard it, and they put it on just for S&Gs. And a line began to form because people were listening to the record and was like, we want that record.
Wow.
And they sold out of it. And that's when Impulse realized it was something special. And what that represents for me as an artist is the purity, the authenticity, the radical humanity, right? Because at our most authentic place inside is where we find everybody. And whether you like jazz or not, whether you know who Coltrane is or not, I've seen people who never heard jazz, didn't even think they liked it, love that record. Because there's a very human thing. There's a spiritual presence in that music. And that's what our music has always been. You talked about the drum and its evolution. The drum is one of our greatest spiritual technologies that we've created.
Right.
And its original intent was to communicate with that which is the ancestors and us. That's why it was a form of communication, right? And to the extent where after rites of initiation, folks got drum names. So the drum would play out a particular rhythmic and pitch pattern, and you would know it's talking to you. In a prayer, it could tap out your patterns, your family patterns, right, and your ancestral patterns, which means now you're connecting on different planes of existence through the vibrational frequencies and rhythmic vibrations created by the drum. Right. So you're checking out Elvin because Elvin's tapping in to that rhythmically.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He doesn't play a tonal drum language, but he plays on a triplet level. Duple, that's Western military art music, march music. Duple, 1, 2, 1, 2. African, triplet, right?
Right.
That's how Elvin plays. So he's engaging that African rhythmic idea, right? Incidentally, African rhythm is so much more complex than European rhythms that we process information at a higher level and speed than non-Africans because the rhythm sets our vibration and our brain patterns to receive information at higher and more levels than the other. So there's a lot that goes into that, right?
Right.
And then you have Jimmy Garrison, who's playing a particular low frequency that gets into the beta and theta waves. Then you've got McCoy Tyner laying the harmonic foundation, which is open. So he doesn't use what we call thirds. If you're thinking about a chord, you have a C, an E, and a G. Between C and E, we call that a third.
Okay.
McCoy would not have a C and E. He would have a C, a F, and a B, right? Those are called fourths, and it opens up the vibrational frequency so Coltrane is not boxed in.
Okay.
And then Coltrane can play between the triplet rhythm of Elvin, the lower level frequencies, lower vibrational frequencies of the bass, and then the open harmonic framing of the piano, whatever he wanted to play.
He's able to float.
He's able to flow in the way that the ancestral and spiritual vibrations dictate for him in that space.
Wow.
Now we're talking metaphysics. Because the collection of frequencies open vortexes in our own souls. That's why it touches us. And it brings us together. I use that whenever we move to a new space. We don't sleep in it. The first day we move everything in, I put on a phone or a laptop or a radio, and it plays a Love Supreme for 24 hours before I lay my head in that new space.
I heard that. Wow. It's amazing. I just have to say it. I mean, we have this legacy of brilliance, and it's just amazing. You talk about the complexity of the song, and also creating room for improvisation. And you kind of touched on this about drumming, and I would even say just music overall being a tool for healing, empowerment, community building. And so there is this sacredness when it comes to music and also the drums. And so how does the healing component of drumming continue to resonate through you and your work? And how do you go about sharing that mantra of this being a healing process?
Yeah. So one, I don't use the word empower or empowerment because it assumes that we don't have power. And by virtue of our being human, we have an innate power that we're socialized against. Because if you knew your power and I knew my power and our power connected, nobody could control us.
Yeah.
Right? I use the phrase elevating agency. Because once you're connected to your power, you have the agency to do something transformative in your space, if not the world, right? And so that's how I think about it from the drum set. You know, I study and lecture on an area of physics called cymatics, C-Y-M-A-T-I-C-S. Cymatics is a Greek word for wave or frequency. And the study of cymatics has found that sound carries energy, and we can infuse sound through nomo, power of the word, or through instruments that has our intentions and spiritual energy in it. And when we have the right intentions, we can invoke and produce vibrations that heal or destroy. It's not so foreign to folks if you understand the Mozart effect. It was really popular in the 90s where they played Mozart to a plant and the plant grew, and they played something like AC/DC to a plant and the plant died. And everybody's like, oh, classical music is healthy. Well, that's not necessarily true, but it's also not necessarily not true. What they don't engage is how those musics are produced in post-production in the studio. Right. When you look at a waveform in classical music, you know, you actually can see the wave in the digital audio workstation because the music ebbs and flows, and those waves are healthier for our systems. Mozart was not a saint. This cat wasn't even trying to heal. He was trying to make money. He was a capitalist. So you can't say that his music is infused with these healthy, healing, transformative vibrations, right? It's the way the music is produced. However, popular music, in this case, rock, AC/DC, I think is the band, when you look at their waveform, it's a brick.
Okay.
So the sound wave is literally punching you with a brick. That's not healthy. So the way the music is produced was kind of, I think, the factor that killed a plant on this side and caused the plant to grow. Because there are musicians who play rock and roll, particularly in the 70s, that had the intention to heal. You know, I'm thinking of John McLaughlin and folks like that, that were basing their artistic expression from sacred texts like the Bhagavad Gita and Eastern Buddhist practices, which in and of itself has a healing and transformational kind of framing, right, through meditation. So they would be meditating through their music. So you can't argue that because it's rock and roll, it's not healing, because now we're talking about intention, right? And the thing that might block that transmission of that energy is the way the music is actually produced in the studio. So that block sound wave instead of an open wave can be harmful. However, when you're there in concert, you're not getting that, right? It's a different thing. So there's that technical piece. So as a drummer, I understand all of that, right? The physics of the music and how to infuse intention. It's just like, when a preacher says, put me in A flat, and then and he starts to hoop, right? Most people don't understand the sermon. I mean, they understand it, but they don't remember the sermon. They feel the hoop.
They feel,
right?
Yes.
Because once that cat gets tuned up, it's that pentatonic scale, and it's the infusion of that spirit energy in that vibration that comes out of the pastor, whomever it is, that affects and moves the audience. Yeah. But is that in conjunction with an inanimate object called a Hammond B3 organ? So why do I feel that A flat the way I do? Right? Because the musician understands their function in that service.
Man, I remember grew up in the Baptist church, Reverend West, and I could tell when you will see the organist, he's sitting with the congregation, and then it get to that point where you see him get up and go move to the organ, and you're like, well, then you see the organ, and then he starts to,
it's time.
Yes,
yeah,
and I was always, you're right about this feeling, because I'm just gonna be real. I would be half asleep through the sermon, but when it got to that point,
that's when church start.
Yes, yes. I'm waking, and I know I guess part of it is I know we getting to the end of the sermon too,
right?
But at the same time, though, it does affect this feeling. And when you were talking about healing and so forth, I think Shock G, who was a member of Digital Underground, and he played the piano.
Yeah.
He was a
organ.
very good musician.
Yeah.
Even though it was a hip hop, band, so to speak, and very good musician. But I think he talked about those frequencies, and how he talked about how those frequencies and could even help heal cancer and all types of ailments and so forth. And I know that when I'm gonna feel, if I feel any anxiety or whatever, whatnot, putting on a certain type of music, for me was big. It's been big over the last few years. I listen to a lot of lo-fi, and just listening to, and I need something I don't need any words. I just need to have something that's going to settle my spirit and put me in a calming place. So I definitely understand that.
That's real, and it's something that we've known for generations. I mentioned that Europe would not have a classical music tradition if we in Africa had not introduced the science of music to them in the 8th century, 711 CE to be exact. What we took with us was an instrument called an oud. It had 4 or 5 strings, and each string was tuned to a particular system of the body. It was actually used for healing.
Wow.
And in many African languages across the continent, there were no words that separated music from magic, from medicine. I mean, music was not a thing that stood on its own in the way that we understand it in the West. And so this science of healing through vibration is something that's ancient for us. The West is just figuring it out.
Wow. So, I mean, this has been great. We could vibe out on this forever.
For sure.
But I definitely want to take the time to, we got Love Supreme. You're doing that. But what's upon the horizon for you? And most importantly, you talked a little bit about how can folks stay connected with your work and support you.
For sure. So we have a lot going on this year. We're recording 7 albums. They'll come out over the next few years. I am most excited for our upcoming session in June, which will be the Unity Suite. Given the divisive nature of our politics and the fact that neighbors don't always know each other and don't feel like we can have conversations that bring us together in community in practice of our radical humanity. I wrote a composition called The Unity Suite that incidentally is inspired by the music of the Black church and our sacred traditions. And we'll premiere that at the Wexner Center for the Arts in Columbus on October 2nd. You can follow all of that on marklomaxii.com, marklomaxii.com. We're also recording a piece in August with string quartet, my jazz quartet with William Minifield, Dean Hewlett, and Eddie Baird, a DJ, Crate Digger, and a poet, Scott Woods, called Black Odes. We've performed it here in Cincinnati a few times at Eden Park. And it's really Afrofuturism in a lot of ways because it's a piece that imagines a world without Black trauma.
Wow.
So when you talk about healing and transformation, I think James Baldwin said, not everything faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And sometimes facing something means imagining a world without it and seeing ourselves without the trauma as a means of moving past the trauma. It doesn't mean we're not dealing with it. It's just that we're now able to see ourselves whole and healthy and happy and powerful. Without being able to envision ourselves that way, how can we get past the trauma that exists today? So all of our work is geared toward, telling these stories. We just recorded a piece called Parables with my trio, Dean Hewlett on bass, Eddie Baird on saxophone, and Scott Woods. And we pulled things from the headlines last year. It's 5 movements. The first is a parable about the Haitian situation in Springfield, because that was part of the political discourse.
Right.
The second is about bodily autonomy and a woman's right to choose. The third is making the assertion that America has never been what America said it was. And the fourth is a moral of the story. And then the fifth is a blues, because that brings us back again to our most human self. So everything we're doing this year is about healing and transformation, but not negating the reality of the situation that we're in.
I mean, this for me, this conversation has been fruitful. I've been over here taking notes. When you talk about, elevating agency, that is something that, I talk about, Underground Railroad history. I talk about, how those freedom seekers had self-agency in liberating themselves. Yes, they may have had help along the way, but you have to have that agency. And then the idea when you talked about you not fraying away from the word empowerment or empower, to understand that we are born with a power and reverence that we need to appreciate. It's the world that chips away at that.
That's exactly right.
That shows. And so I want to thank you for sharing that and that perspective. And, that's very meaningful. Well,
I want to say, I don't do this alone, right? I mentioned the cats in my band. We have a network of musicians around the country that we work with when we're on the road. And here in Cincinnati, I couldn't do what I do without Tiffany Cooper, who helps me think. I'll send her stuff and what do you think about this? She's like, maybe you should think about this.
She's
you know how she is.
Tiffany's all right. She's not all that. She's all right.
But recently, she's
I love
been.
Tiffany.
Oh, for sure. She's been the reason I had the residency with the Cincinnati Symphony through the Mac Innovator situation. She's the one that got us at Eden Park. And so it's good to have a team around you that's more like family than they are, employers, employee, transactional kind of stuff. It really is a familial thing to do this work that I need to do my best work.
Well, you have your band on stage and you have your band that's off stage.
That's right.
That helps support you. You have to have that.
That's right. And my wife Ruth is the number one person. She's like, yo, that concert was not good.
She gonna give you the real
practice.
Huh?
You know what I mean? If nobody else is keeping it real with me, she is. And it's been like that for 25 years. And it's the role of women in my life is, I can't talk about how important that's been. And I say that on purpose, not only because it's true, but because we're entering the age of Aquarius and the rise of the divine feminine. And if we don't understand that, then it's hard to heal, because that's a part, as men, of our balance too. We have masculine and feminine ashe, right? And we have to honor all of that. So I think it's important that there are women on my side and in front of me sometime, you know, where folks will be like, I'm the guy, I'm the man. It's like, nah, fuck that.
Man, I would say for the most part, history and women have been our greatest warriors.
100%.
You know, it's like when Black Panther came on the scene, you know, with Ryan Coogler. Black Panther couldn't be what he did without the warriors, the women warriors that were around. Yes. And they were bad.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I see that in real life, how women show up for our communities and are, in keeping us lifted.
So we have to give honor and respect to where it's due.
Absolutely, 100%. Black innovation and improvisation have been and continues to be the cornerstone of American culture. From field songs to jazz to R&B to hip hop and more, the primal beats of the drums have been an essential component that keeps us connected, serving as a conducive form of communication and expression. The drummer continues to be needed, so let us not forget to give the drummer some. Much appreciation to my special guest, Dr. Mark Lomax II, to my viewers and listeners. This is Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Know thy history.
Ashe.
Ashe.